Hello, everybody. I am Mrs. Poppet, and this is my place. I'm so glad you came for another story time today. I love it when we get to read a good story together. Today's story you may not have heard of before. It's called Green Snake. Ooh, you may not think that's going to be a good story, but trust me, it is. And it's one we'll have to do in 2 parts again, so we'll do part 1 right now. Green Snake. Once upon a time, a queen had twin baby girls. She invited a dozen fairies to visit. In those days when fairies came, they made gifts to the new babies. They often turned ordinary infants into marvels of wit and grace. But sometimes parents who sought fairy gifts got more than they bargained for. A magnificent banquet was prepared for the fairies. As they were about to sit down, old Mag appeared. She was the meanest of a family of mean fairies. The queen shook in her slippers. Old Mag, who hadn't been invited, was sure to be insulted. Who knew what she might do? The queen quickly brought old Mag a jeweled chair. The fairy said rudely, "I don't need that. I'm tall enough standing up." But her eyes scarcely reached up to the top of the table. The position was most uncomfortable and made her crosser. "Please, do take a chair and sit down," begged the queen. "If you wanted me to sit at your table, you'd have invited me," said old Mag. "Well, I may be old and I may be ugly, but my magic is as powerful as if I were pretty. Maybe more so." At last she consented to sit down. Then she saw each of the other fairies had a corsage of jewels. There was no corsage for her. Instead, the queen brought her a ruby box crammed with diamonds. Old Mag snapped, "Keep your junk. I already own more jewels than I want. You've proved that you're never meant to invite me." She banged her wand on the table. The delicious food turned into plates full of sizzling snakes. The other fairies jumped up and ran, horrified. As they went, old Mag hurried to the first baby's crib. "I give you," she spat, "the gift of being absolutely hideous." As she started for the second crib, the other fairies ran in and held her back. That made her furious. She flew smash through the window on a bolt of lightning. The other fairies gave the first baby the best gifts they could, but the queen wept as her baby grew uglier by the minute. "How can we comfort her?" the fairies wondered. They whispered together. "Majesty," they said, "don't cry. We promise one day your baby will be the happiest girl alive." "But will she be beautiful?" sobbed the queen. "We may not explain," they said, "but trust us, she'll be happy." The queen thanked them and then gave them armloads of presents. Although fairies have everything, they still like presents very much. The queen named the first twin Dorugly and the second Dorabelle. The names were apt. Dorugly grew up to be ugly indeed. Dorabelle was a very pretty girl. When Dorugly was 12, she just wanted to leave the court. The king owned a deserted castle where she could live unseen, and her parents agreed to let her go there. She left with her dear old nurse and a few servants. The ancient castle was at the sea's edge. There were woods on both sides and wide fields beyond. There she lived alone for 2 years. She practiced her music and drawing. She even wrote 2 books of poetry. But she felt lonely for her parents, and one day she drove back to their court. She arrived just in time to see the merry wedding of her sister Dorabelle to a neighboring king. Her family was far from glad to see her. Hardly anyone spoke to her, except to say, "Dorugly, you're much uglier these days. That face of yours should be hidden. It's enough to spoil the wedding gift's enjoyment." Poor Dorugly said quietly, "I hadn't meant to interfere. I just missed you all. But you don't want to see me. I'll leave right away." Dorugly felt like losing her temper and telling them that her ugliness was not her fault, but theirs. But she was wise and hid her hurt. With her faithful nurse, she went back to her castle. One day, as she was walking in the forest, she came on a great green snake. It reared and it crusted head and said, "Good morning, Dorugly. Don't be sad. Look at me. I'm uglier than you, yet I was once very handsome." Dorugly was too frightened to hear. She ran home and stayed inside for days. But one evening, tired of her rooms, she went walking by the sea. Out of nowhere, with no one aboard, sailed a fantastic little boat. It was golden and painted in delightful designs. Its mast and oars were of cedar, and its sails were of gold brocade. It drifted to the water's edge, and Dorugly climbed aboard so she could see it better. She went into the tiny cabin, which was hung with scarlet velvet, draped on diamond nails. She was charmed until she noticed the boat was drifting out to sea. Dorugly seized the oars and tried to row, but the wind took her out of sight of land. She thought, "I will surely die. I should be glad. I'm so ugly, everybody hates me. My sister's a queen, but I'm just a hermit. Only horrid snakes talk to me." Just then, in fact, a green snake swam over to the waves. It called, "If you let a horrid snake help, I could save your life." "I'd sooner die," said Dorugly, who was afraid of snakes. Without a word, Green Snake vanished under the waves. "That horrid green creature scares me," thought Dorugly. "I shake when I see those ivory claws and bronze wings and fiery eyes. I'd rather die than owe my life to him. But why does he follow me? And how did we learn to talk?" Out of the air a voice replied, "Princess, be kinder to Green Snake. After all, he's handsome for a snake, while you are ugly for a girl. He can help you more than you suppose if you will only let him." A big gust of wind came just then and drove the boat against a rock. It broke into 1,000 pieces. Dorugly managed to grab a piece as it floated by. Holding it tight, she stayed afloat until she could get a foothold on the rock. She almost fainted when she saw she had held, not a piece of wood, but Green Snake. He swam off a little way when he saw she was afraid. "You fear me less if you knew me better," he called, and then he vanished. Dorugly was alone on the enormous rock. "I'm safe from the sea," she thought, "but on this rock I'll probably starve to death." Night was coming. She climbed as high as she could. Then she made a pillow of her apron and went woefully to sleep. As she slept, the sound of soft music came to her ears. Dorugly thought that she was dreaming. But imagine her astonishment when she opened her eyes. The rock, the sea, they were gone. She was on a golden couch in a golden room. Outside was a golden balcony. Wondering, she went out on the balcony to look around. Before her spread gardens, parks, and woods. There were graceful fountains and statues and hundreds of jeweled little houses. On the calm sea below, boats sailed busily. It was beautiful. "Where am I?" asked Dorugly. "Is it possible that the snake who saved me from drowning was only yesterday?" There was a knock, and she went to the door. She looked down at a delightful, strange sight. 50 tiny Chinese dolls, come to life, smiled up at her. They were less than a foot tall and of every possible shape. Some were pretty, some were comical, and just some were unusual. Some were made of diamonds, of crystal and diamonds. Some were made of pearls, some of crystal and rubies, some of rubies, and some of porcelain. The dolls had come to welcome Dorugly to their charming kingdom. Their leader was a ruby doll. "My lady," he said, "our king wishes us to make your stay as happy as we can. We are his messengers. We go about the world pretending to be lifeless figurines. We bring back the latest invention and news to amuse our king. We're at your orders, my lady, if only you will stay with us." They showed her the way to the gardens, where she found a fine swimming pool. Under a royal green pavilion stood 2 golden chairs. "Who are those?" asked Dorugly. "One is for our king. The other is yours, my lady," said the Ruby Doll. "But where is the king?" asked Dorugly. "He's away at wars," answered the doll. "Is he married?" asked Dorugly. "No," said the doll. "He's never met a girl to share his high ideals." Dorugly went for a swim in the beautiful pool. Then the pearl dress doll helped her into a silk dressing gown. A set of dolls paraded ahead of her, playing instruments made from nutshells. They led her to her room. More dolls combed and dressed her hair and brought splendid clothes. The dolls were the wisest, wittiest, and kindliest friends imaginable. For the first time in her life, Dorugly enjoyed being a princess. A week in such company made Dorugly's sweet, bright disposition come to life, and all the dolls grew to love her dearly. One night, as she lay in her bed, she wondered, "What's next? This is a wonderful life." "But my heart feels empty for some reason." "You know the reason, my lady, if you learn to love," said a voice in the air. "True joy comes only to those who love." "Which doll is speaking?" asked the princess. "No doll. I am the king of this land, my lady, and I love you dearly." "A king loves me?" Dorugly said. "You have to be blind. I'm the ugliest thing alive." "I have seen you, and I disagree. Anyway, I adore you," said the voice. "You are very kind," said Dorugly. "I hardly know what to say. The idea is too new." The invisible king said no more that night. The next day Dorugly didn't want to talk to him with the dolls, but she did ask if the king had come home. "No," they said, and this puzzled her. "Is he a young man and handsome?" she asked. "Yes," they answered, "and charming too. We get news of him every day." "But does he know I'm here?" Dorugly wondered. "Yes, my lady," said the Ruby Doll. "He knows all about you. A messenger goes every hour of the day to bring him word of how you are." From then on, Dorugly often heard the king's voice when she was alone. He had such kind things to say, and she forgot to be afraid. One dark night she woke to see a dim figure near her bed. Thinking it her friend, the pearl doll, she put out her hand, but the hand was held and kissed, and tears fell upon it. She knew it must be the king. "What do you expect of me?" she said. "How can I learn to love you if I've never even seen you?" "My princess, I can't show you myself to you. Wicked old Mag, who was cruel to you, laid a 7-year curse on me. 5 years have passed. 2 years of her curse are left. They'd be happy years if you'd agree to marry me now." No one could deny the kindness and generosity of the invisible king. Dorugly began to feel love and gratitude fill her heart. She agreed to marry the king. She promised she wouldn't try to see him until the 2 years were up. "You see, my dear," he said, should you try to see me, the 7 years of my curse would begin all over again. If you have to share in my punishment, you'll get bad advice and be tempted to break your promise. If you keep your promise, a glad day will come. I'll be as handsome as you'd want, and you'll get back the beauty old Mag took from you." Dorugly had never dared hope for such joy. She vowed to be an obedient wife and absolutely without curiosity. Soon they were quietly married. Months later, Dorugly got the notion that she must invite her family to visit. The king tried to change her mind, but she wouldn't listen. Finally, they sent a party of dolls bearing gifts and an invitation to Dorugly's mother, who was far over the sea. Her mother was very curious to see Dorugly and her husband. She came at once with Dorabelle. Dorugly enjoyed showing them her palace and her pretty kingdom. When they asked for her husband, she made up excuses. She was too honest to lie cleverly. One day she said her husband was off on a pilgrimage. Another, she said he was ill, or fighting a war, or out hunting. Her mother and sister suspected she had no husband at all, and they began to tease her. Well, that's it for today, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the green snake so far. It just goes to show that, people may not be what you think, and so we'll have to see if that's true when we get to the end of the story tomorrow. I'll see you then.